All right, so we have HTML elements. And this is where we start to fill in some of the gaps of where we started with any sort of introductory. There's going to be some things that maybe aren't explained right away that we'll come back to. So we're going to dive deeper into some of these and maybe even repeat ourselves and go back and do these things that maybe we already know. But it's important to do this, and the repetition of it will create comfortability, and that will also allow you to be able to maybe if you like on a started going through this class and took a little bit of a break, um, the repetition of it keeps you on track. And I like that about this example, but in a lot of computer science classes in general, you don't get a ton of repetition. At least in my opinion, I feel like there's um, a lot of courses, a lot of books, even that kind of just dive right into it. And that might be for an experienced programmer that's learning a new language, like that might make a lot of sense. But someone that's a first time learner, the repetition is very good. So HTML element. It says an HTML element is defined by a start tag, some content, and an end tag. So HTML elements, the HTML element is everything from the start tag to the end tag. So I have the start tag here and an end tag, right? So there are a lot of different elements that we've already worked with, just like H1, and then you close the H1 tag. Then you have the paragraph tag, start tag, and the end tag. I might refer to them as the open tag or the close tag. It's just the verbiage that I had learned, and it's just that. Um, so we already went through this, but what this will um, just add in here, the break, right? We went through the break. There's no content that's being involved in it. Um, some HTML elements have no content, like the break element. These elements are called empty elements. Empty elements do not have an end tag. Okay. Nested HTML elements. It says HTML elements can be nested. This means that elements can contain other elements. I'm also drinking a cup of coffee, so here, a quick break. That's the reason why. Um, so an HTML element can be nested. It contains other elements. I mean, just like in this example here, right? We have HTML and it contains a body element, contains the H1 element, the P element, all inside of the HTML. The following example contains 4 HTML elements, and these 3 are nested in the HTML element. Now check this out. H1 and P, my header 1 and my paragraph, are nested inside of the body element. Okay. Example explained. Says the HTML element is the root element and it defines the whole HTML document. Okay. So the root element. The root, typically root means like the most important essential element. Knowing that it defines the whole HTML document means it's very important. Open, close. Inside the HTML element, there is a body element. Okay, the body is the meat of where you're going to find everything. Okay, um, the body element defines the document's body, just like the human body, right? Think of it as like you were setting the parameters, and now this is the meat of where things are contained. It has a start tag, which is body, and an end tag, which is / body. Then inside the body element, there are 2 other elements, H1 and P. Just in this example, those are the 2 other elements. That's not saying these are the only 2 other elements that you can ever put. That's just what we've included so far, right? So we have the body element, and we have H1 and P. chart inside of it. What happened there? Okay. Okay, it says the H1 element is defines a heading. Okay, we've gone through H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. And then anything higher than H6 returns a paragraph. Um, so H1, my first heading. The P element defines a paragraph. We know all this. This is all review. Never skip the end tag. Very important, right? So some HTML elements will display correctly even if you forget to end the end tag. Put the end tag. Let's take a look, right? This is a paragraph. Check that out. We didn't include the end tag there, but it still showed up. Okay, it's not good to do that, but in this case, it says some HTML elements, looks like paragraph is one of them, that will display correctly even if you forget the end tag, right? It still showed up. However, never rely on this. Unexpected results and errors may occur. Forget the end tags. Um, yeah, if you go back and edit your code and forget something, I'd always recommend making sure that you're including the start and end. Empty HTML elements. It says HTML elements with no content are called empty elements. The BR tag defines a line break, right? So that BR, the break, is a line break. It is an empty element without a closing tag. So it said this is a break paragraph with a line break. So it should say this is a, and then move on to the next line, paragraph with a line break. So you can include breaks in there. I don't know, let's play around with this a little bit, right? This is a paragraph. What if we add another BR here? Let's run it. Check it out. And maybe I add another one here. Okay, so I had a lot of breaks. If I were to remove one, if I remove this is a paragraph and run it, this is a paragraph with a line break. Okay. So just something to note there. You can play with it, mess with it, but this is how you would create multiple lines with the break. HTML is not case sensitive. There are, if you have dealt with programming languages before, many programming languages are case sensitive. HTML really isn't a programming language, but in learning HTML, it's good to know that it's not case sensitive. We talked about how the doc type element, when you wrote that, it wasn't case sensitive, but do know that that's also, I guess not but in addition to that, you can also know that all of HTML is not case sensitive. Um, so you could write a capital P, you could write a lowercase p, up to you. I'd recommend lowercase. Why? Because it's a standard. What's a standard? A standard just means that a lot of people do it. And when a lot of people do it, doesn't mean that you have to do it. There's a lot of stuff that a lot of people do that I don't agree with and I don't do. But this is uh, this is what is just a standard. You'll see a lot of people use it. If other people are like, if you eventually like get a job working in teams and you're split up different projects and maybe you have to go back and relook at your code. Sometimes it's good to follow a specific standard that other people can read and not be confused by. I'm not saying that capitalizing something will significantly confuse someone, but um, it's according to your style and what you want to do ultimately. But it says HTML standard does not require lowercase tags, but W3C recommends um, lowercase in HTML and demands lowercase for stricter documents like XHTML. So, we'll get into XHTML later, I'm assuming. But, some stricter document types do require lowercase. So we always use lowercase in this class. Some exercise. It says, test yourself with exercises. Insert the correct tag. Well, I opened H1, so let's close it. I was talking. I like doing the actual typing part. All right, that's my favorite part. Submit answer. Done. Okay. Let's look at the second question. Okay, insert the correct end tags. So I opened up H4, which means I have to close H4. There's my start P. I need to end P. And I open the body right here. So I'm going to want to close the body right there. I opened HTML. Let's go ahead and close it. Submit. Done. Love it. Cool, cool. Moving back. It says HTML tag reference. W3Schools tag reference contains additional information about these tags and their attributes. So I have, it says HTML defines the root of an HTML document. Body defines the body, the document's body. H1 to H6 defines HTML headings. Okay. For a complete list of all available, check this out, all available HTML tags. Let's check this out. Let's see what it looks like. That's a lot, right? That's a lot. So HTML element reference, they're all alphabetized there. Okay. So, a lot of these, obviously, we just started this class. So, but this is what you got. Sure, we'll touch on a lot of this. Create a table, right? A lot of cool elements. HTML element reference. I'll go back to where I was. But yeah, these are just something to look at. And that was the end of HTML elements. Moving on. HTML attributes. Okay, it says HTML attributes provide additional information about HTML elements. We talked about the href attribute. We briefly mentioned an image, right? And didn't really get into any detail whatsoever, but it showed you could use different attributes of the width, the height, etc. It says all HTML elements can have attributes or properties. Attributes provide additional information about elements, so you can be more specific. Attributes are always specified in the start tag. Check that out. Always specified in the start tag. Always specified. Attribute, whenever you see always specified, it's not just once, every time. They usually come in name value pairs, like name equals, and then whatever the value is. Okay, let's get to some examples. We mentioned the href. There you go. The screen's completely moved. The href attribute. The a tag defines a hyperlink. The href attribute specifies the URL of the page the link goes to. Okay, so I have this a tag here. A href. It specifies, the href specifies the URL. And then visit W3Schools and then the end. So let's go ahead and try it yourself. Okay. We have already done something like this before, but if you click on the link, it takes you there. Pretty sweet. Run it again. HTML links are defined with the A tag. The link address is specified in the href attribute. Okay. Um, we previously, another example, I put a different website name in there and it worked too. And you can move through and I mean, you can, maybe we can play with this. I think last time we did something like this. We did like, what's all Superliga? And then typed in here. Well, that's not what we did. We did HTTP www.futsalsuperliga.com. Notice the quotation marks. You have to include those quotation marks. Very important. Futsal Super Liga. Okay. And if I run it, I get this and I click on it. Last time it took a second to load. Looks like it's doing the same this time around. I'm not sure why. It's still taking a while to load. Let's run it one more time. Added the S in there. Yeah, HTTPS. That time it worked. All right. So I just typed that out wrong. And look at that. There's me randomly. But yeah, so going back to this, the href attribute was h2. If I wanted to change like the header to h1, could if I wanted to. Look at that, make it bigger. HTML links are defined with a tag. If I wanted to add a break in here, I can. Check this out. There you go. Yeah, cool. Let's move on. You'll learn, keeps on doing this. Weird. You'll learn more in our HTML links chapter. So looks like it's down there. So once again, it'll intro something, give you a little bit, and say, we'll come back to this later. Which might be hard to like be like, no, I want to learn now, but it's like so multifaceted. Let's learn all these things and learn the basics of them. And you can dive deeper into each. But yeah. It says the SRC attribute. Okay. The IMG tag is used to embed an image in an HTML page. The SRC attribute specifies the path to the image to be displayed. Okay, so try it yourself. Well, notice it says IMG and then source. Notice that we said it's always specified in the start tag. So it's specified in the start. Let's go ahead and try it yourself. Okay, so we have the SRC attribute. Those HTML images are defined with the IMG tag, and then the file name of the image source is specified in the SRC attribute. Okay, right there. And then we said with height, etc. Do note that you might be wondering, how do I even add the picture in there? Doesn't mention it yet, but I will get to that, I'm sure, which is right now. There you go. There are two ways to specify the URL in the SRC attribute. Links to an external image that is hosted on another website. There's an example right there. You can say SRC and link it to another outside website. But it says external images might be under copyright. If you do not get permission to use it, you may be in violation of copyright laws. In addition, you cannot control external images. It can suddenly be removed or changed. Links to an image that is hosted within the website. This is the relative URL. Here the URL does not include the domain name, and the URL begins, sorry, if the URL begins without a slash, it will be relative to the current page. If the URL begins with a slash, it will be relative to the domain. It is always best to use relative URLs. They will not break if you change your domain. So how do we do that? Well, we'll definitely touch on it, especially since there's an HTML images down here. I think right now the only thing they wanted to really mention was the SRC attribute, and then said, oh yeah, by the way, right, you can include relative or absolute URLs. Because if you're using the relative URL in this example right here, saying like, how does the computer know where to pull this file from, right? img girl.jpg. Um, it will explain that later on too. Okay. The width and height attributes, we mentioned them before, but check this out. So you have the width and you have the height, because the img tag should contain the width and height attributes, which specify the width and height of the image in pixels, right? So it's height and width in pixels. And there's an example, right? So let's say I want the width to be, I'll make this like super skinny. Watch this, 100. Yeah, that doesn't look good, right? 500. If we did like 5,000 by 6,000, be huge, right? You don't want that big. So you're able to specify the height, the width, all that fun stuff. Okay, close out of that. Close out that one too. Um, so we went to right here. Okay, height and width. It says should also contain which specify the height and width in pixels. The alt attribute, moving on, the acquired alt attribute for the image tag specifies an alternate text for the image. If the image for some reason can't be displayed, this can be due to a slow connection or an error in the SRC attribute. So it's like, hey, look, if this image for some odd reason doesn't show up on the screen, what do you want it to say? So kind of like an alternative, right? What would you like for it to show up alternatively? It says girl with a jacket. Try it yourself, right? So I don't know. Let's say that I'll like, what happens if I like spell this wrong, right? Like that. See, so I spelled it wrong. It's like, hey, by the way, girl with a jacket's supposed to be there. Maybe it's just loading slowly, right? But when it's spelled correctly, it works. Might just be slow. Okay. See what happens when we try to display an image that doesn't exist. They basically just did the same thing I did. They wrote IMG typo. They showed up girl with a jacket. Okay. You'll learn more about images and HTML images. Exactly. That's way down there. Not way down there, but down there. The style attribute. Oh, this is how we make things look nice. We'll learn about HTML styles later on. The style attribute is used to add styles to an element such as color, font, size, and more. Okay, so try this out. So let's say in this paragraph right here, it says the style attribute is used to add styles to an element such as color. The end of the paragraph. So this is a red paragraph. Um, it's funny. There's this book called it's a kid's book, very, very, very for young kids, and I have kids. So it's called "Come See My Bugs," and the one page says this is a red bug, and you flip to the next page. It's like this is a green bug, this is a blue bug. And at the very end, it says "Come see my bugs." So I saw this is a red paragraph. I thought of this is a red bug. Um, so if I were to like copy this, I'm just playing around at this point right here. So color, let's say blue. This is a blue paragraph. And copy, say this is a, it's my last one. I'll just add yellow. This is a yellow paragraph. Okay, look at that. Oh, that is hard to read, but there you go. Let's just leave it. Let's make it really hard. It'd be funny to make like a really, really, really ugly website and make it like for a big company. There are some bigger companies that have very bad websites almost on purpose. But yeah. So anyway, going back, the inside, the attribute style says the color of the paragraph, the text would be yellow. Notice that it's inside quotation marks, and it had color, colon, red, and then a semicolon, right? So the color was separated by this colon to say, hey, this is a color I'm working with. And I was able to type in a color and it showed up. Pretty sweet. You'll learn more about it in the HTML style. So once again, we're introducing things and then learning more about it later. Okay. You should always, we see the word always, pay attention. We should always include the lang attribute inside the HTML tag to declare the language of the web page. This is meant to assist search engines and browsers. Okay, let's look and see if they did themselves. And sure enough, they did. Look at that. Look at that. It says doc type HTML lang equals N US. So like US English. Okay. In this case, it just said N, yen. Um, this is a following example. So, the doc type HTML and then HTML inside of, like, this was their open tag, and they used the lang attribute. And they said, okay, lang is English. I'm guessing EN is the abbreviation. Country codes can also be added to the language. Country codes can also be added to the language code in the lang attribute. So the first two characters define the language of the HTML page, and the last two characters define the country. So looks like it's separated by English, separated by a hyphen, and then US. The following example specifies English as the language and United States as the country. You can see all the language codes. Let's click on this. Let's see the language codes, right? Okay, so these are the standards, right? Um, these are all the language codes. Spanish down there, right there. ES, Espanol. Sweet. I'm going to go back to where we were. But yeah, you can see all the language codes there if you want to. The title attribute defines some extra information about an element. Okay, so the value of the title attribute will be displayed as a tooltip when you mouse over the element. Let's check this out. Okay, so H2 include title. I'm a header. So if I hover over this, I have to leave it over there for a second, right? So I I scrolled over there and expected it to happen faster, but it took a second. I'm a header. Okay. So they called it a tooltip. Okay. Um, it says the value of the title will be displayed as a tooltip when you mouse over the element. That's the title attribute. So if you go down here, I'm a tooltip. Um, I'm a header. I'm a tooltip. Um, so with that, once again, you open the tag, you include the attribute, and you go from there. Sweet. Says we suggest always use lowercase attributes. Okay. Once again, not case sensitive, but we recommend it. HTML standard does not require lowercase attribute names. The title attribute and all other attributes can be written with uppercase or lowercase, like title or title. Recommends lowercase. However, W3C recommends lowercase attributes in HTML and demands lowercase attributes for stricter documents like HTML. Okay, we already talked about that, but at W3Schools, we always use lowercase attribute names. We suggest always quote attribute values. Okay, so the HTML standard does not require quotes, but we recommend them. So, these two would work. It's good, like it says good, right? Good, quotation marks, bad. Because stricter documents like XHTML do require them. So it's a good practice to learn them this way, especially in the beginning. And then if you later on don't want to include them and you're like, I really don't care, I'm not going to work with XHTML, then you can take that off. But you don't need to have quotation marks. But it's good too. Good, bad. Sometimes you have to use quotes. This example will not display the title attribute correctly because it contains a space, right? So try it yourself. So I'll run it. It says you cannot omit quotes around an attribute value if the value contains spaces. Okay. If you move the mouse over the paragraph above, blah, blah. If you move the mouse over the paragraph above, your browser will only display the first word from the title. About, right? So it thinks that W3Schools is something entirely different. Like it's not even including that, it's just saying about. So they want you to say quotation marks, W3Schools. Now watch. There you go. So about W3Schools. Pretty sweet. Got it. Moving on. W3Schools, we always use quotes. Good. Single or double quotes. Well, double quotes around attribute values are the most common way to do it in HTML, but single quotes can also be used if you really want to. Um, in some situations, when the attribute value itself contains double quotes, it's necessary to use single quotes. Here's an example. Right. So if you want like John Nelson, but his nickname is Shotgun, right? So what they've said here is, you know, if you have single quotes, if you typically use single quotes, I typically use double quotes, right? So if you typically use double quotes, um, if you want to like mention, hey, Shotgun, and if you want the nickname to be in single quotes, then you do it that way. So it says John with double quotes, John Shotgun Nelson, or single quotes. So they purposely done that so that way you can use either, but um, yeah, they both work. It says in some situations it's necessary, and we did that. Because notice if I would have done like John Shotgun Nelson, it like ends John there because like that's my start, that's my end, right? So that's the reason why we had to change it up. So it's like open John right here with single quotes and then display this, and then this is where I ended it. So single quotes are necessary in this occasion here. Okay. You might have a preference that you want to like you want John to show up with double quotes or shotgun to show up with double quotes. Maybe you want shotgun to show up in single quotes. So different ways of doing it. Chapter summary. What did we learn? All HTML elements can have attributes. The href attribute of A specifies the URL of the page and the link it goes to. So a ton of everything. We learned the href attribute, src attribute, which is the source for an image, width and height, the alt, which gave me the alternative, what would show up if I was hovering over, sorry, if the image didn't show up right away. The style, I could change the color, the font, the size. No, we didn't dive too deep into that, but will eventually too. And the language and some titles, tooltip. Okay. So it says add a tooltip to the paragraph below with the text about W3Schools. So, title, okay, P title equals double quotes about W3Schools, end it, close it. W3Schools is a web developer site. Boom. Look at that. Let's submit it. Correct. Exercise 2. Set the size of the image to 250 pixels, inside quotation marks there. Can't type today. And width is 400 pixels tall. And run it. Got it. Make the element below into a link that goes to the website. So remember, that would be the href attribute. Href. And then I believe there was, let's actually go back here. Goodness. So I wrote href and then the equal sign. Oh my goodness. Of course, the equal sign. Href equals. Okay. Correct. Alternate text is useful when the image cannot be displayed, like when the page is read by a screen reader. Okay, specify an alternate text. The alt, right? Alt equals submission. There we go. Okay. So each time we use the equals, right? Title equals, we had width equals, height equals, href equals, source equals, and then alt equals. Cool. Good stuff. Good stuff. Completed that. It says HTML attribute reference, a complete list for all attributes. Check this out. Let's click on it. These are all different attributes. A lot, right? We could play around with each if we wanted, but right now we're just not going to. There's a lot. So if you want to go back to that, I'm sure we'll go back to that at some point. It looks like it's down there. Okay. So that was HTML attributes.